probably cover the procedure. Just in case of emergency, there are no planned fire drills or bomb drills. If you hear the fire alarm, please treat it as a real emergency and evacuate the building via the nearest escape route. Nearest escape route is via the stairs to your left as you leave the council chamber. Follow me if you like. Exit via the door at the back of the building, walk around through the inner car park to the evacuation point, which is on the pavement opposite the police station. Don't use the lifts, a key message, and don't enter the building until you're told it's safe to do so by a member of staff. And welcome here to the meeting of the Pension Fund Committee. It's 10:01, so we started pretty much scheduled this morning. I'll take item 1 on the agenda, which is to receive any apologies or changes in membership.
Apologies have been Councillor Ian Ward.
Paul. Nothing, haven't heard from Councillor Nick. Are we expecting Chris Ward or Hubbleday? Names are out.
They have been invited. Not directly.
Okay. Item 2 on the agenda is the minutes of the last regular meeting held on the 22nd of November. We've all had a chance to see those minutes and go through them. Had a quick look through them again this morning. Are there any comment changes? Proposed by Councillor Fuller and seconded by Councillor Churchman. Everybody to the contrary. It's unanimous. Good. Item 3 on the agenda is declarations of interest. Declaration. Notice we did have last time by the that he has a personal investment portfolio. I'm sure if that's actually most of us have.
It's absolutely not. The key that segregated the information that you pension purposes only and taken personal use.
Well, I'll take it today then that there are no further declarations. Item 4 on the agenda is public question time. Nobody in the gallery today. Do we have any? Item 5 then on the agenda is the reflection board. Martin, is there anything you want to add to the document that we?
If I can just draw out the main concern that has been raised over the last few pensions board, I think it's probably worth making putting a particular onus on that, and that's that of resulting on the fund side, but also on the admin side. Obviously, we've been worried about that key person risk for well, since I started 2 years ago, and it has only just been elevating since that point. Pension fund upcoming departure, and on admin side, I know the key staff, inexperienced staff in the admin side, and obviously short term on And I am concerned because of the outlook over the LGPS in particular over the next so much that we have to look at. We're still embedding the McLeod remedy. There's still a lot waiting for statutory guidance. That we're waiting for our software to catch up. Dashboard months away from a huge product of opening up our data. Of opening up our data favours pension pots dashboard. The next steps on investment and expecting there to be more requirements, expecting changes to 2016 investment regs, the investment strategy guidance, going down the track time, good governance coming in. We've got the guidance on new governance compliance statement, annual report guidance, funding strategy guidance. They're going to blend in the general code. Be significant. Looking at this collectively over the next months, see that there is a huge challenge. As well as climate reporting, we're expecting governments to come out. What climate report? And we've got standard admin tasks of everyone's pensions here, sending out annual benefits, valuation. And my fear is that the kind of risks that are now becoming so elevated, there's a real risk of something falling over. We've got a commitment to 5,500 pensioners, make correct payments to them. There are other, if something goes wrong, huge impact to them. Occasional local media, national. Saw that just before Christmas on the BBC News, West Midlands pension fund pay their pensioners one. That becomes nationwide. That's the risks that we have when relying on inexperienced staff, new staff, gaps staffing. And data breaches, we find tens of thousands of pounds errors sending out data by mistake. So that's the burn really from the great to hear. I've been told in the past doing nothing is not an option. At the moment, it's the only option we have is so the committee delegated job as a board are concerned.
I did 19 major options, going through my fingers, just noting as you. It is becoming a very critical issue, and I'm aware that multiple representations have been made, which is very much hoping that executive not, and we have deducted from pending the amplifier. Thank you for raising. Just one more thing that I should raise to round up your 19. We do have a rewriting going on. Main constitution with the cross changing to a committee. And I'm a member of that. Striving to do structurally within whole, sure that the of the pension side assured attendance committee issue, staffing issue. Two. I think Steve, you had some.
Thank you, Martin. You mentioned the West Midlands issue and possibility that saying that what happened here is
West Midlands had their own internal problems about their administration system, so that way it's not a contagion that will necessarily affect us. But it is an example of when things go wrong, it escalates, rebounds.
And of course, we are, Steve, dependent on Wight County. Any of the systems. There to be any adverse situation developing, undoubtedly. Anything else said today? We'll thank you. Comprehensive.
Who, if we could make everything. Thank you very much.
Councillor Fuller.
Thank you very much. The capacity concern. And I know that it's a concern, but what we are actually trying to do on the fund to address it. I think if we haven't got the capacity, the fear that I've got is that our pensioners will not be able to get the money that they are entitled to at the end of each month. And I think that we need to be waking up to this, and it'd be really useful to know what the plan is in place, because this is something that's been occurring for months, if not years now, and I'm just wondering how we are going to address this. And I think we need to have solutions, and perhaps this is something that the pension fund we need to be able to address in a future meeting, because we just can't carry on the way that we are. We know that there's problems getting younger people involved, but again, having them in the position doesn't mean necessarily they're going to stay with us, because we lose so many of our youngsters to the mainland. And certainly at the end of the day, it's going to be those authorities that can afford that will benefit, and it's going to be places like the Isle of Wight that are going to be affected more adversely. And I'd really like to know what kind of solution you feel that we can use to be able to address the problems that we're encountering at the moment. Thank you.
It's a really good point. Hybrid working has changed the landscape for pensions, and all pension administrators are now competing for quality staff, and it does make it vital to review your pay. You have to unhook it from the council. It shouldn't be governed by the council's pay policies. It should be treated independently, and that was a part of the good governance review that the government carried out to try and persuade authorities to unhook pensions function from their pay policy and actually recruit staff who can do the post, and that's the most important thing. And as a committee, we have a fiduciary, you have a fiduciary duty to fund your employers, your members, get that get the effective administration of benefits. So in short, I think all administrators are looking at their pay policies, reviewing their staff structure, is it fit for purpose, and changing and doing it. It's not a one and done, it's a continual review of the market. Admin costs are a very small percentage, so staffing costs, staff that you see, fund officers here, a very small percentage of the pension fund itself compared to the cost of investment. Admin costs are, there's no real damage to the fund by paying more. In fact, it's a benefit to the fund because your data is getting better. The actuaries aren't relying on estimates. They can get drilled down really good data, and that lowers your liabilities of the fund. It's really important that each fund has a review of its pay and its staffing and unhook that from the general organisational pay. And
thank you, Martin. I think Joe wanted to reply just quickly to that, and then I'll come to Councillor Brading.
Thank you, Chair. Just to put in context, the pension fund is administered by the Isle of Wight, and as such is subject to Isle of Wight Council's policies and procedures in terms of recruitment, retention, pay and for its staff. This is a matter that we have raised. One of the key issues is that the pensions administration team is operated under the council's business centre, rather than consolidated with the governance and investment functions of the council. And therefore, as part of the business centre, its management and operation is handled in exactly the same way as the other areas in that service. So creditor payments, payroll, etc. At no point in the job descriptions and the role profiles of our administration team have we specified a requirement for education or professional experience in pension. And whilst the team is under the management of the business centre, we are very much hampered in the resource staff. It has been recommended a number of times that the structure of the pension fund used to consolidate the administration function, governance side, first mentioned in 2008, latterly mentioned in the Barnett-Waddingham reviewed by the Finance Chief and the Director of April 2023. Until direction is given from council, pension fund cannot make any changes that it is.
Brading.
Thank you, Chairman. Just really listening and following on to what Martin Joe has said, report has raised issues. I don't know whether it's the board's role to can make recommendations as well. So there's recommendations in the rest. I think that it does highlight the issues. Recommendation. I've been on this committee now for 7 years. Every meeting, key worker and capacity are mentioned at some point during 7 years. Nothing has really changed as far as we can see. I think Chris Ward and Kerry Hobbleday's absence today is disappointing. They must have known this issue was going to come up from somewhere, the committee. That neither of them are here face to face or virtually is disappointing. And I just think this shows the not lack of importance they put on it, but an issue that's not going to go away, now getting worse. As Mark said, there are issues that potentially down the line could cost us more, hurt us more. And that something was done about it. The way it's managed seems to be pensions managed from on this has to now, after 7 years, actually finally be noted and actions taken, I think.
Thank you, Councillor Bing. I think Steve next.
Chair.
And I'll come to you, Vanessa.
No, you're absolutely right. We've addressed, well, had this issue brought forward times around it. Trade unions, obviously, I would agree, fair pay should be consistent across and develop and can be reviewed again and again. So the scope job evaluation. In the day, if you can't get the people to pay, consider pay having.
I'd like to support what Councillor Brading has said. I find it ridiculous that we have a pension fund which is now worth nearly 700, well over £500,000, and we are not employing the expertise to actually run that amount of money. Ladies, people like Joe go into the city and literally earn £250,000 a year. Our fund managers earn colossal money because of their expertise, amount of work, and the amount of money that they control and handle. And I just find it incredible that we, in fact, don't pay our staff. My personal opinion is that, fortunately, when Joe leaves, I don't think one person come here and do the amount of work that she does. I could well see us employing 2 people to do that particular job. That's very much a personal opinion. But I've seen at first hand what she has done over the years, etc. And I'm sorry, folks, I can't see anybody coming to the island to take over that very, very demanding job and what it entails. Thank you, Chair.
I think we're all in agreement on this one.
Just a quick one. I agree with what everyone has said. But I think that the key underpinning issue is the Barnett-Warrington report, which needs a decision so that we can move ahead on some of these things. It's been stagnant for a year now. We need a decision. I know it's difficult. I think the managing authority has several conflicts of interest, just stopping them from, making a decision. They're tying up budgeting, staffing with council work. I think they have a lack of understanding of the complexity of the modern LGPS, and that it's a standalone function. And we need a decision as to how we're going strategically with the fund, and that report is
we'll note the absence of the executive officers today. As you say, reports. Right. Next item is item 6 on the agenda, which is the governance compliance statement and action plan. Joe.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just for clarity, members, this is the same report, the same appendix is presented at this report as was presented in draft at the November Pension Fund Committee. It was presented in draft at the Pension Fund Committee in November so that it could be included in the published unaudited annual report and accounts for the pension fund for the year ended March 23, but then was taken to the pension board meeting in December and has been fully reviewed and is now recommended for adoption by the Pension Fund Committee formally. There are 3 areas identified in the governance compliance statement where we've self-assessed ourselves effectively as non-compliant, and those are set out in the action plan in Appendix 2 to this report. The 3 key areas of identified non-compliance at the date that this report was prepared, which is October 2023, was knowledge and skills, which we will be addressing later on in this agenda under item 7, I think, item 14, apologies. The internal disputes and complaints processes, which a draft updated policy has been prepared, is being consulted on with employers at the moment and will be presented to the local pension board on the 6th of March for onward recommendation to the Pension Fund Committee in May 2024. And the fund-specific conflicts of interest policy, which again, a draft policy has been prepared with support from Hymans Robertson, and it's been shared with the Director of Finance and the Monitoring Officer for their comments on its consistency with other council policies on conflicts. And again, that policy will be presented to the local pension board for review at their 6th of March meeting and onward recommendation to the Pension Fund Committee in May 24. So those 3 key areas of previously identified non-compliance should be resolved reasonably quickly, at least giving us greater compliance with the requirements of the existing codes of practice. Given recent changes in circumstances and as we've discussed previously, I would like to highlight some new areas of concern that I think need to be drawn to the committee's attention. Section P4 on managing risks on page 38 of the pack. The risk of having internal controls in place to include adequate systems, arrangements and procedures for the administration and management of the fund. Obviously, with my pending departure and the issues with admin staffing, we may risk non-compliance in this area going forward. Similarly, on page 41, the issue of scheme record keeping, being able to demonstrate they keep accurate, up-to-date and enduring records, and retention and data quality all the way through that section. Again, with the administration staffing issues, we're in a very, very good place to start with, but I don't anticipate there being a cliff edge where it will fall apart completely immediately, but there is a risk of downward trajectory on data quality, given the number of staff that we have and the resources we have. Similarly, on page 54, member communications, again, we don't have dedicated resource in the pensions administration team or elsewhere to specifically focus on communications. We do it as it's needed, and the danger is that we lose some of the impetus that we have with that, with our focus having to be on paying pensions. again, within the compliance plan in its entirety, many of the actions are driven by staff. And if I'm not here, I'm not entirely sure taking those on. I mean, there are some that Matthew deals with, there are some that Joe deals with. And sorry, members, can I introduce Louisa Richards, who's attending this meeting today? She is the impending pensions governance compliance officer due to start with the council on the 26th of February. So some of the governance activity could be transitioned to Louisa in time, but not something that she can pick up and run away. Sorry, I think the recommendation that we have in front of you on page 4 is sorry, page 19, apologies, is that, apologies, I wrote the wrong number down on my piece of paper, is that the governance compliance statement as presented for the year ended March 23 is adopted and published on the pension fund's website, that the action plan to address areas of non-compliance is agreed, and that the local pension board be delegated to monitor progress against the action plan and report back to each future committee meeting. I was also going to suggest at this stage that the governance compliance statement be rolled forward for adoption as it stands for the March 24 year end, because although the areas of non-compliance will be addressed, they won't be addressed until May, formally with the adoption of the policies. So it would save work for the limited resources that will remain with the fund to adopt this governance compliance for the March 24 year end as well for year end. So that would be an additional recommendation. Happy to take any questions or comments.
Any questions, members? Councillor Fuller.
I'd like to say thank you to Joe over the years. You've done an absolutely fantastic job. I know when the email went out telling us that you were moving forward, we were advised as members that Kerry and Chris would take over managing the role that you are undertaking. So I am very disappointed that neither of them can turn up today. To not apologise and not give a reason, I think is absolutely scandalous. That is my own view. We are in a very, very difficult position anyway, and I would really expect to have their input. If they're not going to be here, who can we rely upon? You know, these are senior officers, and I'm so disappointed they're not here. I know I could moan and groan and everything. On a lighter note, I did manage to get 3/4 of the way through this report, and I thought, I'm sure I've got a bit of deja vu here. So I really appreciate the fact that you did remind us that this was a report that we saw in November. But thank you for everything, Joe, and you are a star, and we're going to miss you.
Thank you, Councillor Fuller. I think we all echo that. I was saving it to the end, but why not? Why not just keep saying it? I think it's the right thing to do. So with the addition then that we agree that the compliance material which is not going to be reviewed until May, should be considered to be continue to be valid until the end of this financial year. Are we happy to accept the recommendations of the report? If you deem that, please signify. That's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed, Joe. We'll now move on to item 7, which is page 69 in your pack, which is the breaches log. Oh.
Thank you. This report, I hope, as presented, provides a good deal of information about the issue that we're facing. The key issue is that the pension board's current terms of reference, as included in the council constitution, state that one of the employer representatives on the board shall be an elected member of the Isle of Wight Council. Following Councillor Lilly's resignation from the board in May 2023, successive council meetings in July, September, November and January have failed to make this appointment to the board. Whilst the board still maintains in its constitution an equal number of scheme member and employer reps, being 3 of each, we have been operating for most of this last year with a vacant position in the one of the employer reps, which has meant unequal representation at the meetings. We're still in compliance with regulation because the minimum number of members is 2 + 2, so a total of 4. We have 3 + 3, but one of those is a vacancy. So whilst we are in compliance with the regulations, we are not directly in compliance with the council's constitution, and the council is not meeting its duty within the constitution to appoint a member to that board. The detail in the report assesses this as a potential breach of the law with regards to regulations, and mostly with respect to the council's own internal constitution. The background of the report in paragraphs 16 to 18 of the report shows how the board, on advice from Hymans Robertson, has considered the cause, effect, impact and wider implications of this potential breach. And at this point, it has been determined that the breach is not, well, at the 12th of December meeting, sorry, for the pension board, it was determined that the breach was not significantly material to report to the pensions regulator, on the understanding that a report was going to the January full council meeting to nominate a member, and the work that this committee undertook to promote the process, emails that were sent by the pension fund manager, the chief executive and democratic services. However, as reported, the January full council meeting did not appoint, and so further consideration needs to be given. It's proposed that a solution to this is for this committee to make a recommendation to the full council at its March meeting that the terms of reference for the pension board be amended to read: one of the employer representatives may be an elected member of the council. This would mean that the council at its March meeting has the opportunity to make a nomination, although given 4 meetings have failed to do that, it's highly unlikely. But then delegation can be given to the chief executive to nominate an additional staff member to represent the council as employer on the pension board. Making the option may be an elected member means that future administrations have the opportunity to appoint a member onto the board, but if they fail to do so, delegation can be given to the chief exec to appoint a member and then not risk having the incorrect number of members on the board. Based on, if that is agreed by this committee, an item will be put on the forward plan and a report will be prepared for full council to make that change effective from the 20th of March. And I understand at that point, if full council agree to the change, those changes become effective, and a nomination can be made by the chief executive to fill that board. Based on that assumption, the proposal from myself is that this breach is still not reported to the pensions regulator, because we are taking further action to mitigate it. If a decision is not made if this committee decide not to recommend a change in administration in terms of reference, then this report will be considered of material significance to the pensions regulator, as contained in the paper. I'm happy to take any questions at this point.
Councillor Churchman was first, then Councillor Fuller.
I find it incredible that this is added to the pension board. We have 39 councillors on the Isle of Wight, and the number of meetings that we all attend is quite heavy. It's got worse over the years. Being on the pensions board requires quite a lot of training sessions, etc. And quite frankly, as a councillor, where on earth am I going to fit all those sessions and meetings into my current schedule? I sit on planning, I sit on pensions, obviously. I go to I go to Access, and I really one of the few councillors who enjoy pensions. But what I'm saying is the amount of time that would have to be devoted to one of us going on the pensions board is virtually prohibitive. I sort of looked at the training sessions and the meetings, and I mean, to me, a second point is I don't think, I could be wrong, that any or many of the councillors are members of the pension scheme. At one time, there were 2 or 3 or 4, but now, so as a councillor to sit on that board, I actually am not even in the scheme. And I quite like the suggestion that an officer who belongs to the scheme, works for the council, takes the place of a councillor. To me, it's much more practical. After all, with 39 councillors, we're expected to fulfil everything that very large pension schemes with 80 odd councillors have. They have the capacity, and quite frankly, with 39 people, I just don't think we have that capacity. So I would support the idea of a member, senior member of the council staff taking over that place. I'd be interested to hear Martin's comments. Thank you.
I'll give Martin a chance to reply to that briefly, and then I'll come over to Councillor Fuller.
I think you're right. There is an issue with capacity, and it's very important for anybody joining the board has capacity to carry out that training. You mentioned it's a really part of, to have a scrutiny role. You have to have an understanding of what you're scrutinising, and I think that's why the government, as part of the good governance project, is thinking about installing those requirements for councillors as well. So it may be once we see the full amount of good governance guidance, that councillors are asked to commit a similar amount of training. No one, I'm sure when they get elected, nobody thinks about joining a pensions committee or pensions board, perhaps, but it is a vital role, as we were talking about earlier. But I think, as you said, at least it does give flexibility to widen the net to get representatives board.
Thank you, Martin. Councillor Fuller.
Thank you. I've got to admit and agree with Martin. You know, when I got re-elected back in 2021, I wasn't thinking to myself, gosh, I can't wait to get back onto the pensions committee again. You make a very good point, and you know, the amount of work that there needs to be done within the pension, understanding about the pensions role, and you know, I'm only just touching at the tip of the iceberg. I know one of the things I was going to suggest was I came off this board to go on this board to be able to be legally compliant, because that was always an option, but then we wouldn't be able to fill this committee. I think the question I wanted to ask really is, if we are going to appoint a member of staff, is there going to be the willingness within the staff team to be able to do the same? Knowing the level of work and commitment, research, everything that you've got to do, is this putting an extra burden on a member of staff? And would that make it quite difficult to find a further member of staff to join that board?
Joe, and then
Thank you, councillor Fuller. The council, as we've said previously, is the administering authority for the Isle of Wight Council Pension Fund. It is also by far the largest employer within that fund, with 85% of active membership being employed by the council. The administering authority under regulations is required to establish a pension board. The administering authority is required to determine the way that the pension board is operated and the appointment process and selection process for its members. The decision was taken when the pension boards were introduced that as the council was both the administering authority and the largest employer and responsible for the future income of 17,000 members of former current staff in the island, probably impacting at least most, if not all, households on the Isle of Wight, that a councillor should be a member of that board. I do fully appreciate that councillors are busy, and as Councillor Axford always used to say, nobody is elected on the pension fund. I fully get that. However, the council is the largest employer and should be taking a bigger interest in its pension scheme for its staff. In terms of the senior officer position or an officer position, members should also note that it did take a significant amount of time for a nomination to be received when the previous senior management representative on the board, Ashley Curzon, resigned. He resigned in May 23, and it was only in October 23, following 2 rounds of recruitment activity, that the replacement member of staff rep was appointed to this board. We took the decision to increase the minimum number of the membership of the board from 4, 2 plus 2, to 6, 3 plus 3, because we were having significant issues obtaining quorum for the meeting with only 4 members of the board. So we've taken it to 6 members of the board and left quorum at 3 members, being 1 employer and 1 scheme member rep at least. And we've still struggled to maintain quorum, and we've still struggled to get members attending. This is a statutory duty of the council as administering authority to operate a pension board. The flexibility that is given by amending the terms of reference to May ensures that there is a greater pool to select the employer representative from, but it will then be down to the chief executive and the corporate management team to select that member. My proposal would be, in advance of the full council report, to put together a staff information pack that can be rolled out effectively on the 21st of March if the council determines to make that. But that would be probably another 4 to 6 weeks before anybody would be appointed onto that position. I don't think there's anything else I can do. It is a very important role. There is a lot of training and understanding, but that's again under regulations that needs to happen. So I think the recommendation of amending the council's terms of reference, whilst frustrating, would be the best solution.
thank you, Joe. Councillor Brady.
Just can I
Oh,
come
sorry.
back, please, Chairman? Just one thing that you said, that the pool, I would say it's probably more of a teardrop than a pool. It is worrying. I am quite happy to come off this board to be the elected member if it helps to resolve some of the problems. But you know, I'm quite happy to talk to the chairman about that to see whether that may help, because I totally understand where we are, and I can only pull myself in so many directions, but I'm quite happy to support it because I think it is so important. We're talking about 17,000 residents here, and I think we owe it to them to make sure that there is an elected member to represent those people. But if not, I do like your cunning plan, Joe. Wouldn't expect anything better from you.
Well, the good news here is that the plan doesn't preclude the option, so it still has the word may. This possibility is still there. Councillor.
Thank you, Chairman. This is very tricky because the last thing we want to do is to be reported for a breach of any sort. Yes, there's a lot of training required. I'm not going to support the recommendation, and I'll tell you why. One of my fears is this council is going to go down the route very shortly, hopefully, of changing to a committee structure. And we will be setting up key committees that will make decisions for this council without cabinet members. And people are going to sit on those committees because they're told to do so. We have 39 councillors, and with due respect, a lot of them don't do an awful lot by way of sitting on committees. It's the same people. If I'm speaking out of turn, I apologise, but there are certain councillors, and there has been for all the time I've been a councillor in 7 years, that don't, and all sides, all parties, all groups, that don't actually sit on any committees. They attend one full council meeting, 6 full council meetings a year, and don't do an awful lot else apart from their ward work. When we go to a committee structure, more people are going to have to step up and sit on committees. And the same applies to pension committee and pension board. It needs to be spelt out to them. It's the statutory duty that we have a councillor on the pension board. Giving it as a maybe, they'll think it was maybe I don't need to volunteer. So we don't want to be in breach of anything. I think councillors, we've told our group that we need to get you on a pension committee, pension board. Training is an issue, but training is there. But for every committee you sit on, training is required, whether it be Children's Services Committee, Adult Social Care, but whatever committee you sit on, you need an element of training to be an effective committee member. So I still believe that we need to get a member of one of the 39 people to join the pension board. Councillor Barry did it for many years. Councillor Lilly did it and then dropped it straight away, which is unfortunate. But I think we need to go down that route. And if we're going to have a paper to full council in March, I think it's down to perhaps one of the officers, senior officers, to present to the councillors the paper and explain statutorily why we have to have a member, or we'll be in breach. And I think someone's going to have to step forward and volunteer. Councillor Fuller's already said, I know Councillor Hurt's probably the same, would happily swap to the board, then we create a vacancy elsewhere. We may have to do that in the short term, to say, look, the board needs a statutory member, we have a volunteer, that will mean backfilling on the committee, as it will on all committees going forward if we go down a committee structure. So I think we need to stick to our guns on this one still and say we need a member on the board. Thank you.
Joe. And then I think Councillor Stewart, I don't know, was that a hand up or a finger up or which? Hand up. Right. Go first.
Just for absolute clarity, there is no statutory requirement that it is an elected member on the board. It is a statutory requirement that there are equal numbers of employer and scheme member representatives. It is our constitution, when the board was set up in 2015, that specified that an elected member shall be appointed. So we're not in breach of legislation by not appointing an elected member. We are in breach of our own constitution.
I did mean statutory regarding our constitution as opposed to legally. I was referring to our constitution, yeah.
And to your point, the draft document, which I think we've all seen, or the latest draft document regarding the change to a committee system, has 95 elected member positions on committees, excluding the pension board and pension committee. So roughly, if you divide that by 3, it gives you an idea of expectations. Councillor Stewart.
Two things. First of all, I entirely agree that elected members should take their appropriate positions in pension committees and pension boards and every other committee. We have two responsibilities as elected members. One is to our ward and one is to the island. And we should fulfil both. So unfortunately, that is something which, fortunately, we agree entirely. I find myself agreeing with many council members who appear on the committees with me. But we have to be sensible and pragmatic. I think that the recommendation that we simply change the constitution and then try and encourage colleagues to fulfill that duty would be sensible.
Thank you. And as noted, it doesn't preclude people sitting on it. It still has the word may, so they may on it, but it means that we would not be in breach if they do not. Losing my voice a bit there suddenly. Any other representations on this point? I notice the temperature is falling in the room, by the way. No, I think we've got it. So,
Sorry, Chair, would it be possible, if Andrew McKern, sorry, from Hymans, is there anything, apologies for dragging you in on this one unannounced, is there anything that you would like to add or that you could contribute to this discussion from a governance advisory perspective?
Joe, I think it was the key point you were raising there is that it's not in breach of the Public Service Pension Act requirements or even LGPS regulations. It's simply within the constitution of the Isle of Wight that when you were assessing the makeup of your pension board, that you felt it was important to have a council member on that pension board. To further that point, I would say that having the change of the word does allow you to emphasise again to council members that they can go into that pension board, but will stop that breach of the constitution and having this issue with the pension regulator. Certainly the recommendation and the discussions that we've had with Joe, that change is made, and that is purely again because of the challenge that we have seen in the practical sense of filling that role. That would again be the kind of clear recommendation from myself to yourselves as the committee.
thank you, Andrew. Councillor Fuller.
Although I agree with a lot of what Paul is saying next to me, I think the safest way forward is to support the recommendation. I think insisting on members puts a lot more faith in members of this authority than perhaps we should have. Yeah, I'm happy to support the officer, the recommendation, and look for a seconder.
Councillor Churchman, is that a second? Yeah, I think this issue is going to be quite common within as we move forward when we look at other committees, that we will have to be very careful of the wording we use when we talk about the constitutional and particularly the proportionality of committees. Also, I'm thinking that we can encourage, but we cannot require in this regard. We can define what proportionality should be, but as we have at the moment with a couple of the ungrouped members, that they choose not to sit on various groups to which they have an entitlement. So it's one of those can bring a horse to water but not make it drink sort of situation. So we've got a proposal to accept the recommendations, which is duly seconded. All those in favour of accepting the recommendations? For, against? Abstaining? 1. Right, recommendations are carried. Thank you all for your contributions on this, and thank you for Martin for yours and yours as well, Andrew. Right. Next item on the agenda is item 8, page 81 in the pack, which is the risk register. Go.
Thank you, Chair. running the risk of repeating myself and every previous item on this agenda so far, the pensions risk register has two very high risks, very high scored risks: incapacity and resources. Those risks have been read and have steadily been increasing in score for a number of months, a number of meetings. And I would probably say that they are no longer risks, they are issues. Anyway, sorry. The risk register hasn't been reviewed in its entirety for some time due to capacity issues. But the working with colleagues from Hymans Robertson, thank you very much, Andrew and Susan, for your support in this. We have looked at the red risks, which were the high rated risks, and we have reviewed the amber risks, which are medium rated. We were intending to review the green risks, but other things got in the way, unfortunately. But my intention is that there will be a full review of the risk register for the pension board meeting in March. The report details the number of risks that we have, the categorisation and proposals for closing, increasing risk scores, decreasing risk scores, and the full detail of all of the red rated risks that we have on board. I would, post writing this report, something has been raised around the risk of governance arrangements, which is the failure to have appropriate governance arrangements in place, risk G1. It's currently scored at 9 amber, being unlikely to happen, but a high impact. I would propose, subject separately from this report, that ranking of probability is raised to likely, and the impact remains high, primarily due to the issues we've been discussing around officer capacity, both in governance and administration, and the board membership. So that would become another red risk at 12 scores. So there will be 5 red risks and 1 less amber risk. And the recommendation is slightly amended to increase the score of 4 risks and leave the unchanged score of 19. But this is still subject to the review by the local pension board on the 6th of March, which will then be brought back to the pension fund committee in May. I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions, members? Councillor Churchman.
On page 82, we talk about resilience, key person risk very high, capacity, sufficient resources. When I go to access, I find that they have other counties, the other 10 counties involved in access have quite large pension staff, and 1 or 2 of them have commented to me the fact that we run our pensions virtually on a staff shoestring. And it really does worry me that we just are not putting in enough resources as regard to personnel, not just the fact that we have a pensions officer who is leaving. We are talking about the department as a whole. I see that Steve is, I think, nodding his head in agreement. I think this is the biggest risk to this council and our pension fund than anything else on the register. Thank you, Chair.
Steve.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm just referring to page 93, and there's a phrase there under one of the risks that we're paying Hymans Robertson significant financial cost for governance, but also including administrative costs. I'm not sure what the administrative cost element is, so we put that as a question. How much are we paying for this service? Nothing against Hymans Robertson, and provide excellent high-level technical and investment management services and advice to us, and have done for many years. And that is really to be noted, and is great. But to pay them to do administrative tasks or administrative support, I think is, highlights again the fact that we need to invest in the pensions admin team rather than paying external people to do that advice for us.
I think I'd agree with you.
Thank you. Following the resignation of 3 key members of the pensions administration staff, a decision was made, a consideration has been given by the line management of the business centre to a restructure of the pensions administration. However, the background work to that was delegated to the pensions manager, who is also trying to train 3 trainees and also trying to run a service. So what we have agreed is that Hymans Robertson are providing staff on a management retainer effectively agreement to carry out administration processing for the fund. The key issue that we have is linked into all of the issues that we've described previously, because there is no clear direction on the future of the fund and how it will work. It's very difficult to put together a recruitment plan for administration staff, particularly around the obtaining qualified staff to come in and hit the ground running, or recruit trainees to have somebody be able to train them whilst running business as usual. So we have engaged with Andrew, who I've seen just come up on the screen, so he's probably going to chip in somewhere, that staff will be provided to carry out administration tasks directed by Matthew as pensions admin manager, and close liaison with him, but we are paying a retainer effectively to Hymans Robertson for administration capacity and technical support, in addition to governance support, as outlined in the papers here. So it's one of those chicken and egg situations. Until we have direction on where the future, what's happening with the pension fund, it's very difficult to put together a recruitment plan. But until we've got the staff on board, it's very difficult to put the recruitment plan together, because we haven't got the capacity to write all of the papers and everything that we need. So I think does that help, Steve?
I fully understand the sort of explanation as to why we are where we are, sort of thing, but is there a figure we can put to it?
I think I need to defer to Andrew.
Andrew, we'll let you in.
Yes, thanks very much. Just again to further that point, this is absolutely an interim solution. It's certainly not something that ourselves at Hymans would recommend as anywhere near a medium to long term plan for a fund to request this level of support. However, we are seeing this, and Martin, luckily your pension board chair's there. We're seeing more funds requesting administration support from consultants, not just from Hymans Robertson. In terms of the way that we have structured this support to the fund, we are providing, if memory serves me correct just now, 50 hours of guaranteed senior administration support to the team for the processing of calculations and the review of calculations from the junior members within Matt's team. So that's one part of the support. The other part of the support that's provided to the team is on those technical queries, where the officers can send any sort of administration question across to the team that I'm in, and we will respond to them as quickly as we can on any of those questions. Again, it's to basically free up some of Matt's time to ensure that he's delivering on the core requirements. Cost-wise, just now the retainer value for the senior administration support is at £10,500 a month, and for the technical support is on £13,000 a month. And as we've agreed with Joe and with Matt, these are continually assessed. So we've only really set it up for a 3-month initial period, and then we'll look and see what level of support has been taken by the fund at that point.
Councillor Churchman.
Councillor Brading has just said £23,000 a month.
Is that what I heard?
Yes.
I mean, I just find this incredible. We're just opening up an artery, pouring money out of the council when we should be having a proper structure and providing a salary to attract a really good pensions officer. I can't believe that over £500,000 is being handled like this. And as Joe has said, how many thousands of pensioners do we have relying on an administration which at the moment seems to be literally falling apart at the seams? Thank you, Chair.
Silence can be very powerful. Sorry, were there any other questions? As we get over our stunned initial response.
I'd like to know what Chris Ward's response to that is, because he's running the budget. What's his response to blowing 23 grand a month?
Sorry for the, yes, Councillor Braden, thank you for that. Councillor Stewart and then Councillor Churchman again.
Oh, no, no.
Oh, you finished, okay.
I was trying desperately today to listen more than talk, which is difficult for me, as council colleagues know. So there are two things. Firstly is that those costs are what they are. That's not, people here will know that that is not an outrageous sum for what is provided. So that's one thing which I think we should recognise. The second thing is to consider perhaps what the council might actually do generally about this. And I'm reluctantly going to ask Joe to provide us with some thoughts about how this particular issue might be dealt with, perhaps within the council. You are entirely entitled to say absolutely nothing at all, of course, Joe.
Thank you. And of course, the people who we might have directed some of these questions to are not present today. Don't feel obliged to answer the question, but only if you feel the need to do so.
All I can say is that there was a report commissioned by the Pension Fund by Chris Ward in October 2022 from Barnett Rodingham, which on instruction from the Chief Executive was an options paper to consider options for the future operation of the Isle of Wight Council Pension Fund. This report was presented to the Director of Finance, the Chief Executive and the Director of Resources by Barnett Rodingham, who prepared the report in April 2023.
Sorry, Matt. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
What I'd like to say is I'd like to thank Hymans for all their help and support, because I think without them, I think the team would be in big trouble. So I know it's costing us a lot of money, but it's keeping us out of trouble for the moment. So thanks, guys. I really appreciate that.
And then Trevor.
Yes, the 23,000 is on admin side. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Hymans has also been putting in additional governance support for you, I think, which should have been picked up by a member of staff. So that 23,000 is only part of it. Could you put a figure on the total amount of extra support Hymans have been giving us, which should be covered by internal staff? Just approximate.
I have monthly meetings with Andrew and Susan in terms of project managing the action plans. Those meetings also include discussions with Matthew and Joe and the fund's investment advisors and actuarial services within Hymans. That's quite a significant piece of work, and taking up quite a lot of resources. I'm not in a position to tell you how much that costs, unfortunately.
Trevor.
Is that working?
Just move it a bit closer to you if you
Yeah.
could.
That's, is the £23,000 comes out of the pension fund. It doesn't impact on the council taxpayers of the Isle of Wight.
Yes, Trevor, that comes out of the pensions fund budget. It is part of the general administration cost of the pension fund, which goes into the reports that we provide to you, and may have an impact on employer contribution rates at the end of each triennial valuation, which may have an impact on the amount that the council pays, which may ultimately have an impact on the council taxpayers, but it is minimal.
Thank you for raising that, Trevor. Right, any other questions or observations for people to make on this item? I think we've done it due justice here. We have a series of recommendations before us. Joe, are you happy whether we move with those now? I'm looking for someone to propose those, please. Councillor Fuller, someone to second it. Councillor Brading, all those in favour of the recommendations here. Notwithstanding all the caveats and discussions that we've raised and the lack of advice that we're able to take from our internal finance staff who are not present today. Thank you very much. Right, we'll take item 9 on the agenda, which is pension fund recharges. And I know this was a topic of discussion at the pension board as well. Who's leading on this? Is you, Joe, or right?
So following on from all of the discussions that we've had recently, and possibly most recently the discussions around support that's being received, the most of the charges that are being incurred in terms of support for administration and governance and the operation of the fund are charged directly to the pension fund budget, not going through the council's accounts at all. But because of the employment status of all of the pension fund team, i.e. we are employed by the council, our salaries are paid by the council, so the council has to recharge those costs to the pension fund. There are also central services from the council that are rechargeable to the pension fund, for example, the provision of ICT, HR support, creditor payment support, etc., that are recharged by the council. For the year ended 31st of March, there was approximately 540,000 charged from the council to the pension fund, and the breakdown of that information is provided at Appendix 1 to this report on page 105. So the majority of costs that are recharged are directly staff related. So that's the salaries of the pensions administration team, the finance staff, and me. And then there are a number of other areas that are broken down through central recharges, etc. The pension board were concerned, or not concerned, possibly concerned, raising questions about how those charges were calculated and what services the pension fund received effectively for those recharges. Following the pension board meeting, a question was asked of the finance team for information about how those recharges were calculated, and potentially drawing attention to the fact that there is a cost of £62,000 charged to the pension fund from the council's finance team, which doesn't include my salary, doesn't include Joe's salary. And we weren't entirely sure what those costs were for. At the time the question was asked, we were told that there was a lot of work being done on the council's budget and this couldn't be considered at this time. I'm still to receive an answer from the pension team. But wanted to draw your attention to the fact that these charges are being made to the pension fund, and we are uncertain of some of the basis for those recharges.
Would I be correct in assuming that these are all grossed up figures as well? That, so where they're charging us is not so simply a calculation of an internal charge rate, but it's effectively an external charge rate, including such issues as national insurance and pension contributions, etc. And, you know, staff occupancy, I see, is on there, accommodation is on there. It's very much a grossed up rate, isn't it?
I have asked the question as to how those recharges are calculated and the basis of those recharges. I've not been provided with that information.
That's why I asked the question, because I knew we hadn't got the answer. Martin, I'm sure you want to add something to this.
Comprehensive from Joe. It is was a mystery payment, and I think Joe wasn't getting much response from the finance team on it. So I think if we can go back to the finance team and say that the committee are also interested in unexplained payment, perhaps that might be a way forward.
Thank you, Martin. I think we'll note that as an additional element to the recommendation then, that we ourselves as a committee ask for a detailed breakdown of those figures. I think if any of us were to receive an invoice for £500,000 or so, we'd probably want to break down and expect some degree of compliance with that, not simply I'm too busy to give you a breakdown, let alone to attend our meeting. Any other comments, people? Councillor Fuller.
Yes, Chairman, I'm quite happy to propose the recommendation with those additions that you've raised. I'm very happy to do that, and thank you.
Right, I'll look for a seconder. Councillor Brading was the first one to hand up. All those in favour of that? That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much, everyone. Item 10 on the agenda is the external audit update.
This is a reasonably quick, non-contentious issue, I think. So the pension fund and the Isle of Wight accounts for the year ended March 22 the audit has now been completed, and they were signed off after the September 2023 Audit and Governance Committee meeting, and the final pension fund annual report and accounts for 21-22 have been published on the fund's website. So we can close down March 22 year end. For March 23 year end, following the pension fund committee meeting in November, the draft unaudited annual report and accounts for the pension fund for the year ended March 23 were published on the pension fund's website marginally after the statutory deadline of the 1st of December, but we did publish them and they are available. The pension fund's external audit work for the year ended March 23 has been substantially completed, and there are no matters to report on this on that audit. There are some items that are going into the draft audit results report around the subjectivity of the infrastructure valuation verification, but that's common across all councils, across all pension funds and valuations. However, the March 23 pension fund accounts can't be concluded until the Isle of Wight Council's audit is completed. And therein lies the issue. Government issued a consultation on the 8th of February about national backlogs in local authority audits. There are a number of councils who haven't had their 23 accounts completed. There are a number that haven't had 22 or 21 or 20 audits completed. So the government's consulting on a process to clear the backlogs of historical audits for all years up to 2023 by September 24, and then a recovery to prevent future recurrences and a reform of the audit system. We don't know what that means at the moment, but it's likely that the council's 23 audit opinion will be based on work that's done to date and may have either a clear audit, may have a qualified audit opinion, or the audit opinion may be disclaimed. But that's a matter for discussion with the audit committee. And I believe that will be discussed at the March audit and governance committee. But at the moment, we don't know what impact that has on the pension fund accounts for March 23. We have published, Joe, I think the draft 23 annual report. So that's on the website, and we are in compliance with regulations for that. Moving on to March 24 year end, which is rapidly approaching, the pension fund's interim audit work has started with the external auditors, and our final audit work will be completed, field work will be done in June 24. We are working towards having draft accounts by the end of May 24, all other things being equal. And we will look to publish an unaudited annual report in line with the statutory deadline, which is the 1st of December 24. So we've got some time to plan for that. I understand that the council's 23-24 interim audit work has started, but final audit work on that is expected to be completed. So it's an update that doesn't really give you any update, but just tells you that progress is slow, and but it's in hand.
And ahead of the refer to the audit committee, I'll make sure and have a conversation with Councillor Garrett on that point. Fortunately, he and I seem to get on quite well on most things. So, but it is perplexing. You know, these things do fold in from one element of the council to another, and I think we all know the reason for this. Any questions to Joe on this matter, people? Then I think we just thank you, Joe, for your report. No decision we need to make on that. It's just an update. We've been going for an hour and a half, people. I'm going to suggest we take a 5-minute comfort break now. I can see some people fidgeting and other people running for the door. So I think just to have a brief 5 minutes would be suitable at this time. Thank you.
Yeah, that's one for me. Thanks. I've just about dried out now, so
Chris, yeah.
I'm on mute. You can hear me okay?
Yeah, I was a soggy rat when I came in
Yeah,
as
I
well.
know, I know. Hopefully by the time we leave, it'll dried up. Hopefully this is quite brief. So this is just an update on the implementation of the new strategy. So we've been working on both transferring the fixed income portfolio, establishing a private debt allocation, and establishing an allocation to infrastructure. Joe and the team have been working really hard in transferring the assets across. Moved from Schroders to Royal London. The papers set out, details of what happened. There was a slight delay due to an administration issue with access when the assets were being transferred. But my understanding is that the fund hasn't lost out due to delay. All the kind of the fund managers essentially honoured what they agreed to do for us, so that the assets have been transferred successfully at the agreed cost to the fund. We've also been establishing a private debt allocation. This is a secondary market allocation to private debt, so direct lending to companies that struggle to get finance elsewhere. Lots of work was done to get that in for the first close of the fund just before Christmas, which enabled the fund to get a discount on the typical price of the fund. So I know the legal team worked really hard to get that through, and it was all done in time for the first close, which I think was like the week before Christmas. So good that we got in for that, and we're just awaiting drawdown of assets, which should be in later on, well, very soon. And the final one is the infrastructure with JP Morgan. We're currently working on establishing that allocation. There was a potential opportunity to kind of access that via what's called the secondary market. So that's when a broker essentially puts you in contact with somebody who's looking to sell out of the fund, which would have enabled us to get in quicker and at a discount. Unfortunately, the seller couldn't get their ducks in a row in time to kind of, in our timescales essentially. So we've decided to just go ahead joining the fund normally, and the aim is to get that done this quarter. We'd expect to be drawn down in kind of April, May time when we've been invested in the infrastructure fund. Any questions on that?
Any questions, people? Seems all quite clear. On the drawdown on the debt side, they did say that they anticipated that being quite rapid, didn't they?
Yeah, so that should be any time now, really.
All right, thank you. Are we happy to move the recommendations then, people? Councillor Churchman, I think, got first and seconded by Councillor Fuller. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. 11B then.
Yeah, thanks. So this is the investment strategy statement, which we've revised. The recommendation is that published on the website. A few different things going on. Really, tidying up to make sure that all the dates and etc. are up to date. We've also updated it to reflect the new investment strategy. So those funds that I've been talking about, the private debt and the infrastructure, etc., they're now included in the strategy statement. And also we've kind of expanded the section on ESG and kind of climate change risk to bring that up to date and more reflexive of best practice. So we've significantly enhanced that section to state that we expect our fund managers to be addressing climate risk and societal risk, and that we'll be engaging with the managers to do that. And we expect them to do that with the companies that they're holding. Also a mention of TCFD as well in there, which is the kind of enhanced reporting framework to enable, that's designed to kind of enable asset owners to better understand the climate and ESG risks that they're facing. Yeah, I'm sure in the future, you may wish to do more climate reporting. A lot of other clients that I work with do kind of things like climate dashboards where you can see the actual amount of amount of emissions that the investments are responsible for, and hopefully track those downwards over time. So it's essentially kind of building a framework which we can look to build on in the future as we develop our approach in this area.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah.
May I just preempt a question that I know is coming from Steve Milford and probably from the board in terms of a fund-specific ESG and responsible investment policy. This is and has been on the work plan and has fallen by the wayside. The statements that are in the investment strategy statements are enhanced from what they were previously, but they do still need some work to make them more fund specific and to bring in the enhanced reporting requirements from the Task Force for Climate Related Financial Disclosures, TCFD, which I believe Martin mentioned earlier. We're expecting regulations shortly on that. It's not through lack of enthusiasm for doing this. It has literally been through a capacity and resource constraints that we haven't been able to move this as fast as we'd like. The trouble will be the regulations will come in and we will be forced to comply, so we'll have quite a bit of running to do to catch up. Positively, Access as a pool where most of our liquid assets are, all of our liquid assets are now held, will be doing a lot of our climate related disclosures for us because most of the climate related stuff is on liquid assets. So we can rely hopefully on what Access provides in terms of reporting, but there will be a lot of work that needs to be done locally, and that will form part of the training programme as matters develop in future.
Steve.
Thanks, Joe. Just following on from that, as you suspected, that was an area of our interest. Some while ago, we talked about establishing a small working group to actually develop a policy to propose to the committee, and I'm quite happy to be a member of that working group. I think it was Claire Critchison originally was expressed an interest in leading it, but obviously she's not on the committee now. So, I mean, it's not for me to recommend how you go about it, but I would recommend that a working group on ESG policy be a positive way forward.
Thanks, Steve. We did set up an ESGRI working group a couple of years ago. We did meet twice, and then the members of the working group suggested that I did all the work behind it and report back to them. And at that point, I didn't have the capacity to do it, so the group fell apart. So yes, it is something that does need to be considered, and I think it's something that the committee will want to take forward. But it's not something that I can do before I leave.
I think we have to be very mindful of anything additional at this time that impacts in terms of officer load. Anything else from any comments on this at all? If not, do we have someone to propose the recommendation? Councillor Fuller, seconded by Councillor Churchman. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Chris. Right. Carrying right on, item 12. And
You're stuck with me, I'm afraid.
Yeah,
although it is
I continue my nervousness about property here, by the way. So I think I've been saying that for about a year, and I'm going to keep saying it.
It is warming up a bit. I'll talk to 12B. 12A is essentially the same thing. Maybe just a little bit on the kind of environment, and I'll touch on the fund itself. Quarter four was particularly good quarter for assets. So you can see on page 146, we've got most of the asset classes represented there, and pretty much all of them are positive. global equities did 6.3%. UK gilts did 8.1% over the quarter. So a really good quarter for asset performance, which you'll see leads through to the fund performance later on. Why was that? Essentially, growth has been better than expected. We've seen unexpectedly strong growth driven by consumer spending, which was higher than was expected at the start of the year, and that's led through to asset prices. And also, in particular, inflation came in lower than expected, and even the Federal Reserve in December changed their policy stance to indicate that they would be cutting interest rates in this year, in 2024, which was all positive to markets, and we saw that come through to a good rally in all risk assets towards the end of 2024. So that's all good news. Flip side of that is, as gilt yields do fall, liabilities will have increased slightly, but that's outside the scope of the asset report. So you can see on the following page, as gilt yields have come down a little bit, then the liabilities will have increased. Looking at the fund itself, so on page 152, we can see the performance of all the various assets held, 3.6% over the quarter, which is 1% ahead of its benchmark. So we've had a positive performance and a positive return against the benchmark, which is great news, and has all led to over the year nearly 7% return on the fund. To your point, Chairman, the property fund is probably the one point, the one area that has struggled, and that's the Schroders property fund, and majority of that is down to their office their office investments, and we all know the reasons for that. As working patterns have changed, then the value that's been placed on property assets has changed as well. That doesn't mean you shouldn't hold property. Property is a good diversifier. It won't be like this forever. And one of the first rules of investment is don't put all your eggs in one basket. So we wouldn't be suggesting selling out of property, but it has been an area that has struggled over the year.
Consistently and for some time, I think, hasn't it now? At least the last couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, and it's an asset class that's difficult to come in and out of. It takes a long time to buy and sell property, as we all know. But it does provide a diversifier in the portfolio, and it is still providing income, because commercial property has tenants, they're paying rents, and there will be an income, which is important for paying pensioners and things like that. So I think there is still a place, a part to play for property within a portfolio, but yeah, I mean, it has struggled over the last 12 months or so. Might just be worth one more thing, a couple of more things to mention. The Baillie Gifford Diversified Growth Fund. Now this is the fund that's been held to fund, that we recommended to sell, and that was agreed to sell by the committee as part of the last strategy review. And that's the fund that will be sold to fund these new commitments in infrastructure and private debt. We have been downgrading our view of that fund over time. We've now downgraded it even further to negative. The reasons for that is that the fund over time has been losing money as that kind of approach has become less favourable. It's now quite a small proportion of Baillie Gifford's total assets. I think it's down to about 2%. So we think it's just not getting the kind of attention from Baillie Gifford, the business, that some of their other strategies do. And for that reason, we've decided to move it to a negative rating, although we are, you know, so in the process of selling it anyway. One thing I wanted to mention as well is the BlackRock equity fund. So this was the fund that would replace Lion Trust in February 2003. So you can see on 154, that fund's had a very strong year. It's significantly ahead of its benchmark for the year, 5.7% ahead of its benchmark. So you know they are delivering you know, against their objectives. You know they're proving the worth of asset management, and it was a good decision to move to that fund this year.
Right, are there any questions of Chris on this one? Steve?
Could I just ask, the decision to move away from Bailey Gifford is more the company's performance rather than the actual sectors involved, is that?
It's a bit of both, really. So the idea behind a diversified growth fund is that you're essentially getting steadier returns by doing, as it says, diversifying and trying to time the market. So trying to move in and out of particular areas of the market that you think are more or less attractive. That is a very tricky thing to do, and most managers have struggled to do that. Consequently, investors have decided to move away from those strategies, and they're struggling to attract investment just due to the lack of popularity, the poor track record over recent years. Investors are tending to favour approaches where managers just focus on one area, so just focus on equity, just focus on bonds, and try to specialise there. And Bailey Gifford in particular is probably best known for their equities business, and that's where we think they're strongest. So we've decided not to rate them in this area.
Councillor Churchman?
Do you find that, generally speaking, more fund managers are investing perhaps in the UK, forget the government and what they want and would like to legislate on? Is there a tendency at the moment to focus more on the UK, or are we still globalising for one? I mean, particularly, I have a great distrust of China, and we now have obviously big problems with transporting stuff from China to this country, apart from the fact it is hardly eco-friendly. So, as I said, are fund managers beginning to look inside the UK, or is this still fluid?
I would say that the trend is still for global investment. If I'm honest, I think yeah, people are still looking to invest globally. Predominantly the US. I mean, the US has consistently proven the ability to innovate and to grow their productivity, even through some of the real challenges that we've had over the last few years. I mean, the US has considerably outperformed Europe and China and anywhere else, to be honest, over the last. I mean, the dynamism of the US economy is, you know, incredible, and a lot of managers are looking to diversify globally.
Obviously, we have this US election in November. Are fund managers worried about who gets in, and do they have a preference as a matter of interest?
If they did have a preference, they probably wouldn't say for fear of what might happen. I think tradition. I mean, you know, last time on the US elections came round, you know, people were very fearful what would happen if Trump got elected. Actually, stock markets did very well following following his election. And when you do look back long term, actually, which political party is in power doesn't tend to have too much of an impact on stock market returns, actually, and that's true both in the UK and the US. So I think if you look on a long term basis, I think that who wins the election probably won't affect the markets, although it won't stop there being lots of noise for sure.
I noted what you said. You can see it from the funds which are US heavy on this. You can see the performance characteristics rippling through. And even within that marketplace, there's been a consistent rippling down into the mid caps and the small caps. And a lot of people have gained from that momentum, haven't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the kind of, if you think about what we interact with every day, and most of us spend a significant amount of their money with US companies. I mean, Amazon, Apple, we've all got Microsoft's software on our laptops. It is very much still the engine of the world economy. Even things like demographics favor the US. There's a lot of talk around the baby boomer generation kind of retiring, and of course that is happening. But the difference between American baby boomers and British baby boomers is they had more kids, which is the millennials. So the millennial generation is actually quite a bit larger in the US than it is in Europe. So they don't have that kind of declining population problem that we have in the US. I mean, some of the European demographics are terrible. If you look at countries like Spain and Italy, they're just not having enough kids, and that's going to be really challenging for them in the future.
I think the Isle of Wight echoes many of those problematic European demographics.
I mean, we're a little bit better in the UK than
yeah, except the Isle of Wight.
Europe.
Yeah, we're an outlier on this particular one. We all know the demographics of our island very well, and then they don't look good. So, right. Thank you very much for that, Chris. Are everybody happy to note the reports? Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Next item on the agenda then is number 13, which is the governance support update. And I think we've preempted quite a number of the issues in here, if not all of them, thoroughly.
Yes.
Hello, Susan. Andrew, see you both now.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. And you're absolutely right. The conversation in committee today has, I would say, aligned quite strongly with the governance outlook paper that we set out for committee today. Rather than go through the minutiae of what we've detailed within that paper, I think it's probably important just to call out some of the kind of key highlights that were said there. So we have provided, similar to your pension board, Chair, the impact to the governance work with the loss of Joe, and calling that out to committee today. Within the administration spoke, we have discussed that, in regards to the impact of the loss of staff and the fund's interim plan, where they've requested support from ourselves at Hyman's Robertson. And again, I was just going to reiterate a little bit of the point in regards to that administration support. It's probably as a reflection both on the level of work that is faced by LGPS funds in the administration space, something that Joe has spoken about quite a lot with us. But again, it's confirmation that the role has changed very much from being a transactional administration role to being very technical. And it's that requirement and it's that challenge that Matt and his team face, and that's where they've tied in for main support from ourselves at Hyman's Robertson. So we've detailed that. We also met with fund officers, met with Joe, Matt and Joe to talk about the work that's taking place. Again, confirmation today to committee and board. There is, and reiterating what has already been said by various council members, there is obviously over-reliance on a small number of officers. Councillor Churchman's raised that point quite a lot today in regards to the resources that's shown by the fund. However, even with that small number of officers, the fund still has to fulfil its statutory duties regardless of its size. We've also called out the increase in areas of compliance. So Joe's going to speak later on, I think, in one of the next items in regards to general code of practice. This the trajectory as such of compliance for pension schemes, the pension industry is increasing, is not decreasing. So it's something, again, because of the requirements on the fund, is something for committee and board to continually be aware of. Detailed some information in regards to the benefits of the work. Again, the formalisation of an action plan, supporting the new governance officer, which delighted to see today at the committee meeting. Hopefully given a bit of a list, a bit of a framework for that person to work on when they join the fund. But the really key parts I think I want to talk about today is that outlook for the next period. So on my section 4, so I would hope that everyone that's at the meeting today would agree, the recruit new pension fund manager being top for that next period. A plan, again, for production of the interim period between the new pension manager joining the fund and that decision on the Barnett-Waddingham structural papers. Again, really critical requirement for the fund. We've detailed here about the continued focus on the high priority areas of the fund and a roadmap as such for this new pension fund manager. The action required that I've detailed within today's report is to note the content of this update, and importantly, and as has been said throughout today's meeting, that increased risk to the fund's compliance. And that's both on the governance, on the administration, and actually because of Joe's role on the investment side of things as well. We also say to continue to support the actions and approach to fund governance detailed within today's paper. Reiterate again that prioritise the conclusion of the structural options paper. And we would say for committee to request an action plan for this interim period between the new pension fund manager joining the fund and that decision on the Barnett-Waddingham paper. And I'm happy to take any questions to what we've detailed in the paper.
Thank you for that, Andrew. Any questions on this point, or are we happy to move straight to the recommendation? If so, I'd look for somebody to move that. Right, moved by Councillor Brading, seconded by Councillor Fuller. All those in favour of the recommendations? That's unanimous. Thank you very much for that item. Right. Next item then is number 14, which is the knowledge and understanding update. Is this you, Joe? I assume it is. This is your shining light.
My shining light. First of all, can I just say thank you to Andrew and Susan for the support that they've given me in the governance role, and also for the support on the knowledge progress assessment as well. Committee and board members were asked to participate in the knowledge progress assessment from Hymans Robertson, and this presents the results of that output, linking into the governance compliance statement action plan for knowledge and understanding activities. I would say thank you to those members who did complete the survey. Only 3 out of the 7 committee members did, but thank you for those who did. Thank you again. So the results and report shows the different understanding levels on different topics for participants in the board and committee, and shows where there are collective areas of knowledge that can be shared with among the population of the committee and the board. And page 190 of the report identifies areas where participants in the survey identified where their training needs were. Page 193, which is appendix 2 to this report, sets out at the moment a very high level indicative training plan. It's very small, and I apologise. I will send it through to you electronically so that you can all see it. For discussion, really, on the key areas that are identified as needing or being priorities for training by the participants, and also across the areas that are required for ongoing governance of the fund. The training plan makes a lot of reference to the Hyman's LGPS Online Learning Academy, Lola. But again, I think we discussed at a previous meeting that committee members aren't particularly enamoured of online training and would require would prefer face-to-face or different learning styles. So that's something that we will take forward. I've started discussions with the council's learning and development team about whether we can put a pensions work stream on the council's learning and development hub. Those discussions are at a very early stage. They happened on Friday last week. So we're working together, and there will be some liaison between the council's learning and development team and Hyman's around accessibility and delivery of that. One of the key items on the new governance compliance officer's work plan is to support the delivery of the development plan. Louisa won't be on her own doing this. I'm helping to make sure that she's set up, supported by the learning and development plan team and Hyman's. So the key point I would say is, from the governance current expectations, there will be an expectation that committee members have the same requirement for levels of understanding and knowledge as is currently in legislation for board members, which makes perfect sense given that the committee is the decision-making body and the board is the scrutiny panel effectively. So acknowledging previous discussions about training being onerous for the pension board, there will be a requirement for training for committee members. But with respect, it's £730 million worth of assets and 17,000 pension members and a very complex administration process, etc., etc. So it makes sense that there is a training requirement. I guess really that the report's noted, and any consideration of the initial training plan and priorities, it may be that there is an informal session required to sort of chat through how we take this forward. I haven't really thought that through yet, but happy to take any comments, questions.
Any questions, anybody? Councillor Brading.
I actually thought the online training was very good, because what it did do, it gave you the answers at the end. So when you got one wrong, instead of wrong, it actually told you what the right answer was. But I have to say, I'm surprised only 3 out of 7 bothered to do it. It took about an hour and a quarter. It took me, I was watching telly at the same time, but it's about an hour and a quarter. I'm surprised only 3 did it, because we can't get a fair picture of where the committee are if less than half the committee members have actually bothered to do the training. So perhaps I would like to see all the committee members do the training to give a truer picture, perhaps, of where we actually are. But the training actually was very good this time. It did give you the answers, so you knew where you'd gone wrong. So thank you.
I'm surprised, Councillor Brading, that you needed to see the answers at the end. I'm sure there weren't any that you did get wrong. So.
Thing about the test, it was quite challenging, because if it's too easy,
yeah,
it's just you know. Yeah. But it was actually was quite challenging. Challenge your knowledge. It was good in that respect. But I think for a committee, we need to have a true. If everyone's done it, 7 out of 7, we then have a real picture of where we think our weaknesses are.
Any other questions, Steve?
Yeah, obviously thank Joe for sort of coordinating all this. Just my only sort of question really is, the pension board and the pension committee have different roles. Although obviously there will be overlaps where they both need to know the same things, but are there some things that just the pension board need to know and some things that just the pensions committee need to know?
To be honest, I don't think there are. There are slightly different focuses, but the board, or the committee obviously needs the board's requirement at the moment is to have sufficient knowledge and understanding to enable them to carry out their role and to be familiar with the law, regulations, policies, processes, etc., etc. The pension fund committee also needs to have an awareness of these matters and be familiar with it, but will have probably more in-depth training on investments in particular because that's where the board has no focus on investments. The board is focused on governance and administration. So investments and funding, but I think it's really important that at least the same training is offered to both pension fund committee and board, with maybe then subtle nuances of additional bits of information where relevant for those relevant people. But it is, we've tried to make it as inclusive as possible here. I know Andrew's put his hand up, so he's probably going to say something different.
Thank you for that. Andrew?
Not different, Joe. No. It's just a bit of confirmation. So there was we have referenced about the committee requirement being similar to the pension board. In actual fact, the most recent information that's came out to the LGPS from the investment consultation, which is where it was slightly surprising that they were fitting that in there, but from the Department of Levelling Up Housing and Communities, there was a requirement again of this similar knowledge and skills of the pension board. Actually, if you read it, it felt like it was even going further for committee members, because it was again referring to that role as a decision maker. Importantly, though, for fund officers that are developing these training plans, is that there is no expectation for a committee member or even a board member, in fact, to be subject matter experts. However, they should be able to challenge the information given to them, again demonstrated quite a lot today, and also be able to make an informed, and that's kind of the key part of where LGPS officers are looking to support their committees and boards with their training plans. So I would echo what Joe said, that there probably should be very similar, if not the exact same training. You may find, however, with regards to the committee, there are some slightly more things you would do in investments. Probably is a bit of advice, maybe something to speak again with your pension board chair as well, to see if they think, that the pension board should have that level of knowledge as well for their scrutiny reasons.
Thank you, Andrew. Well, if there are no more questions, would somebody like to propose the recommendations? Oh, Councillor Churchman.
Just to make one point, Hyman's did produce a small leaflet, I think a year ago, which I found very informative. It did try to set out because I'm sorry, I still get confused with some private equity. I even had a fund manager say to me not so long ago that because the whole thing has expanded, even some of them are beginning to lose track of all the different categories, etc. So, I mean, it is, and also I find that sometimes some funds are given slightly different names, and I find that confusing. But anyway, just a comment, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Somebody like to move the recommendations then? Right, so got Councillor Brading, seconded by Councillor Fuller. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Right, next item on the agenda is item 15, which is a verbal update on legislation and regulations.
Thank you. Committee members will have, if you remember, we've been talking about the new pension regulators single code for about 2 years now. It was finally laid before Parliament on the 10th of January and is expected to come into force on the 27th of March. So yay. Eventually, most of the requirements under the new single code, general code, are those that are expected under the Pension Regulators Code of Practice 14 and are demonstrated in our governance compliance statement, which we've already discussed. But there are some new areas, particularly around cyber risk and pension scams, which will be a bigger focus going forward from the pensions regulator. There have been a couple of webinars which we've published, which are publicised previously. Hyman's did a webinar on the 23rd of January. Aon did a webinar on the 29th of January. And I think I emailed around yesterday about Barnet Waddingham having a webinar later on in February. Nick Gannon from the TPR has been at all of those. So they are worth a rewatch. They're slightly different focused, with more information being available. So if you do get the opportunity to have a look at those. So most of it shouldn't be a surprise, and the regulator's expectation at the moment is that the key focus of committees and boards should be on a plan to ensure full compliance in due course with an action plan and a timeline for those achievements. Hymans Robertson are offering a compliance checker toolkit that we can go through and look at all of the areas that are relevant to the local government pension scheme and assess where we stand, whether we're compliant or not, and what we need to do to make ourselves more compliant. That's a self-assessment tool, there's reporting and there's action planning, and it can be an iterative process and progress can be monitored. I would propose purchasing that checker for the fund and working with Louisa as part of her induction to go through that compliance checker and see where we are, to support Louisa's understanding of the fund, but also to demonstrate where we are and what we need to do, perhaps before I move on completely. I think that was probably it, just to say that the code has been launched. There's nothing really new. We're in quite a good place, and the TPR's expectation is that there is a plan to ensure full compliance with actions and timelines. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions of Joe on this one? No, we'll just thank Joe very much for that one then. And question.
I do not understand what, how, why, when, if there is any form of recruitment to replace our current pensions officer. I'm very unclear as to what is happening, what is going on. We do not have the key people here to tell us, which is Chris Ward and I presume Kerry Uppleday. And I really am just, when I say frightened, worried about just what is going to happen to the administration of this fund. We're talking, I keep saying, nearly £750 million. This isn't, even the council only gets, I think it's 300 million from the government every year, 2/3 of which is written off on statutory stuff anyway. We're talking about £750 million, and nothing, to me, appears to be happening. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Fuller.
Listening to what you've just said, Vanessa, can I formally ask on behalf of the committee, we write to Chris Ward and ask him that he comes along to future meetings. It is important, since Joe will be exploring pastures new soon. I think it's important that he ensures that he comes along to these meetings. And if he cannot attend, and there is good reason for him not attending, that he actually sends his apologies. I think it's essential that we either both or one of them should attend these meetings, because we have questions. And I think as members, we should be trying to tease a response from the officers that we can either support or not. So I would like to formally request that is a question to put to Chris Ward and thank you.
I think we'll all be happy with that. I shall also be writing to him following the meeting today, when I had a number of questions to put to him, not least of all about the recruitment process and the current status of it, which I'm not able to put. So I'll put those in writing to him and to the Chief Executive, and ask them to send that reply to all the members of the committee, so we are all appraised of exactly what, and indeed of the board, so that we're all appraised of exactly what is the process and the timeline, given that time is pressing now and we only have another 8 weeks or so. Councillor Brading.
Just adding to that, could you perhaps express the committee's real disappointment that neither him or Kerry turned up, bearing in mind they must have been aware that recruitment questions were being raised this morning following the board's meeting and with Joe's position. Thank you.
I will. I think that we're well aware of that inclusion in today's meeting.
Just one other
Councillor
point.
Churchman.
As a committee member, and I'm sure the rest of everybody else here will agree, to express real thanks to Joe for her dedication and hard work over, how many years is it, Joe? 10? 16 years. She's managed to stay with this council through thick and thin. And if you look at the state of our pension scheme, funds and everything, we are in such a good position. And most of that is down to Joe's due diligence and very hard work. Thank you, Chair.
So say all of us. Any other member questions? Otherwise, I'll take questions from members who are not members of the committee, which there are none. Right. Thank you very much for that. We'll move on to item 17, which is to consider passing a resolution under section 100A, etc., as written here, to exclude the press and public interest, etc. Can I have somebody to move that normal motion? Councillor Brading, seconded by Councillor Fuller, I think. Oh, Councillor Churchman. It was a toss-up between them. All those in favour of that resolution being passed? It is so passed. Thank you very much indeed. We will hereby exclude the press and the public from the remaining